Edward Bates Soper entered this world on February 7, 1855, in Kearney, Missouri. He was the second child among the 8 born to John Lewis Soper and Sarah Hyatt Soper, both hard-working farmers. Little information is available about his life before he embarked on a criminal path. At the age of 20, he committed his initial offense by stealing a horse and subsequently selling it in Kansas City. Sometime following this crime, Soper devised a sinister plan to eliminate his father, John, a man he had developed a deep-seated resentment towards over the years, although the exact reasons for this animosity remain unclear. On January 30, 1880, Edward Soper initiated the formation of a literary society near their family residence in Kearney. He extended an invitation to his father to become a member of this society. However, once his father accepted the invitation, Edward executed a sinister plan. He concealed himself in a feeding lot, patiently waiting for his father's approach. When John Soper drew near, Edward drew his pistol and mercilessly fired 4 shots, ultimately taking his father's life. Subsequently, Edward discreetly disposed of the murder weapon in a nearby creek and returned to the literary society gathering, seamlessly blending in and behaving as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired. Shockingly, when the crime was eventually unearthed, another man named Mapes found himself wrongly convicted of the murder, based on circumstantial evidence, and was unjustly imprisoned. Soper found himself in legal trouble when he was arrested for horse theft, leading to a 2-year prison sentence in a local penitentiary. Following his release, he returned to Clay County, where he tied the knot with Ardila Hunt, a 35-year-old divorcee with 2 children, Maud, 6 years old, and Gillis, 3 years old. Initially, their marriage appeared harmonious. However, discord emerged when Ardila decided to join a local Christian church, a choice that clashed with Soper's purported spiritualist beliefs. Tragedy struck on April 21, 1891, when, while Ardila and her 2 children peacefully slept in their separate rooms at the family farm in Archie, Soper committed a heinous act. He wielded an axe and brutally bludgeoned all 3 of them to death. After the gruesome murders, Soper composed several letters, claiming that he had taken their lives because he believed he couldn't provide for them adequately and preferred their death to a life of suffering. He then locked the doors and announced his intention to leave town, citing the discovery of an illegal saloon, which he found morally objectionable. 3 days following his abrupt departure, concerned neighbors forcibly entered the family home and made the horrifying discovery of the decomposing bodies of his wife and children. Shortly after this revelation, an arrest warrant was issued for Soper, who managed to elude capture for several years. In June 1891, 3 fishermen came across a badly decomposed body, seemingly a drowning victim, in the Missouri River. Initially, this body was believed to be Soper's. Following a coroner's inquest, the man's identity was mistakenly confirmed as Soper's, temporarily closing the case. Meanwhile, the genuine Soper had relocated to Albina, Oregon, which is now a part of Portland. There, he adopted the alias R.S. Sandy Soper and found employment as a car cleaner for the Pullman Company. In 1894, Soper entered into a new marriage with a woman named Catherine Brownlow, and together they had a child named Gillis. For approximately 3 years, the trio enjoyed a relatively contented life. However, tragedy struck one day when Soper inadvertently disclosed his true identity to his wife. On April 16, 1897, Soper, feigning a trip to the shoemaker, left home with his 2-year-old son. However, he never returned. A few days later, he sent a letter to his wife, asserting that the child had been put in a place where he would receive proper care and urged her not to fret about him. In reality, Soper had ventured to the banks of the Willamette River, where he callously cast young Gillis into the water, allowing him to meet a tragic fate by drowning. Subsequently, he retrieved the lifeless body from the river and buried it in close proximity. Over the next month or so, Soper evaded capture while using the alias Homer Lee and securing employment as a farmhand on a farm in Ashland. He successfully remained off law enforcement's radar until a Kansas City police officer named Sam Lowe happened upon a newspaper article detailing the Portland case and noticed the shared surname with the supposedly deceased Soper. Officer Lowe then reached out to his brother, a local prosecutor, who utilized his connections across various Oregon towns to facilitate Lowe's deployment in the pursuit of the fugitive. After an extensive search, Lowe located Soper on the Ashland farm, where he promptly placed him under arrest and initiated proceedings for Soper's extradition back to Missouri. During their journey, Soper eventually confessed to the murder of his wife and 3 children, though he initially denied responsibility for his father's death. Despite displaying no outward remorse for his actions, Officer Lowe later reported that Soper suffered from nightmares about Gillis drowning and would exclaim, he can't swim, poor little fellow," upon awakening. Following a request from the medical examiner to disclose the precise location where he had disposed of Gillis's body, Soper provided directions that ultimately led to the discovery of the young boy's decomposed remains. Given the gravity of his offense in Missouri, Soper was extradited back to the state and charged with the murder of his wife, for which he pleaded insanity. Following an extensive trial spanning several months, he was found guilty and swiftly sentenced to death. He subsequently sought an appeal to the Supreme Court of Missouri, but his appeal, along with those of several other convicted murderers, was dismissed. On March 30, 1899, Soper met his end on the gallows in Harrisonville, in the presence of approximately 40 onlookers. Prior to his execution, he consumed what was described as a substantial meal, declined any religious counsel, and, as his final utterance, uttered, "All is done." His death was likely instantaneous, as an autopsy revealed that his neck had snapped upon the fall.